Howdy my totally tubular gamers, and we are back with another ranking video, and today we're going to be ranking the Mario Tennis series. Yeah. Now tennis, you really don't need me to explain to you what tennis is, right? It's the one with the rackets and the ball, they hit it back and forth. It's one of the most popular sports in the world. Yeah, I'm not going to go any deeper than that. And with a sport as easy to understand and recognizable as tennis, there's been plenty of tennis video games, starting with like tennis all the way back in the Atari days, and then Sega would show up with Virtua Tennis, and finally Mario Tennis would show up. Now Mario Tennis is one of the earliest Mario sports games, and unless you're including NES Open Tournament Golf, it's actually the biggest Mario sports series, tied with Mario Golf. Originally getting started on the Virtual Boy of all things, Mario Tennis is still around even nowadays with a new game on the Switch, and has certainly become a fan favorite when it comes to Mario sports games. It's certainly become Nintendo's favorite, as they seem to put Mario Tennis games out more frequently than any of the other sports games. But I'm all about it. I've been playing the Mario Tennis game since I was a kid. I liked it when I was young, and even nowadays I still have a lot of fun playing these games. And so I thought, you know what, we're going to rank them. We're going to rank all the Mario Tennis games from worst to best. We're going to see how they all stack up against each other and just kind of compare and contrast. I have a lot of fond memories with a couple of these games, and a couple of these games I had not played before this video, and so with that said, we're going to be ranking them based on their playability, how well have they aged, how's the multiplayer, is there any single player content, the usual, the everything. Let me know down below your favorite Mario Tennis and why my list doesn't make any sense because it's full of hot takes or whatever you want to tell me. Like, share, sub, all that great stuff. Let's just get right into it. What do I think is the weakest of the Mario Tennis games? And so here we have Mario's Tennis for the Virtual Boy, releasing in 1995. This is the first and hopefully last time we're looking at a Virtual Boy game on this channel, but yeah, Mario's Tennis. I don't have much experience with this game. I don't really have much experience with the Virtual Boy as a whole. It kind of actually just hurts my eyes looking at it, and this wasn't even through official hardware either. And I mean, let's just start with that. The game takes place in this hellscape where everything is black and red and you just play tennis. The graphics, for 95, I guess this 3D was impressive, but you look back now and it just looks awful with these limited colors, and it's very hard to see. I don't think the presentation is particularly aged well. I don't think the sound has either, as there's not much sound here other than the ball getting hit back and forth. And speaking of, let's talk about that tennis gameplay. It feels very simplistic and very basic, which, I would expect from a mid-90s tennis game, but this feels more simplistic than, like, the Mario tennis game on Game Boy. There's no power-ups or really anything to make this feel like a Mario game outside of the characters. There's a couple Mario characters here, like Mario, Luigi, Peach, Yoshi, Toad, and Donkey Kong Jr., but the actual gameplay, there's really nothing Mario-ish here. It's just a very standard, a substandard, I might add, tennis game where you hit the ball back and forth. There's a couple different shots, and this just wasn't really engaging. It wasn't really fun. There's no way for multiplayer at all. And I thought what content here is lacking, unengaging, and just kind of boring, to be honest. I just didn't really have any fun with this one, and I think that's about enough time I've given the Virtual Boy on this channel, so on to the next game. And so here we have Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, releasing in 2015 for the Wii U. Now, I remember when this game came out, and I didn't think it looked particularly good, and I saw it get pretty much slammed online, and it's considered one of the worst games like Nintendo's ever put out. Now, I am sure there are plenty of very long videos that go over why this game is so bad, and it's just kind of hated amongst Mario Tennis fans, but I'll briefly go over a few things. Now, I will stress that I did not play a ton of this game. I was pretty much one and done with this game because I was just so unhappy with it, and I like the other Mario Tennis games more. I don't even have a Wii U anymore, but I'm definitely not missing anything with this game. The actual core tennis mechanics, it feels fine enough. It's nothing you haven't seen before from a Mario Tennis game, and I wouldn't say it feels particularly better than any of the other Mario Tennis games, but the actual, hitting the ball back and forth, it's fine. It's everywhere else that the game really lacks. When it comes to its character roster, it's considerably weaker than, say, Mario Power Tennis on the GameCube, and a number of fan favorite characters are just straight missing in this game. When it comes to the courts also, it's incredibly bare bones. The other games just had a ton of different courts you could play on, and there were gimmicks and all that. In this game, there's just really nothing when it comes to the characters or courts. When it comes to the game modes, there isn't much here either. There's, regular tennis, there's online play, there's local play, there's a single player where you just kind of go against bots and there's not really much to it. And then there's the mega battle, which was like this game's gimmick where you hit the ball back and forth when you're mega and it's harder to hit it back. And again, this is really the main gimmick of this game, and I don't think it's very good. And with that in mind, there's just not a lot here. Like, you can play the game like an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and you've really seen everything that this game has. The biggest problem with it, and the reason most people disliked it so heavily, there's just nothing here. It's so bare bones. Now, don't get me wrong, Mario Tennis has never been the most content-rich series, but even those games put this game to shame with how little it has. It just really has like nothing to offer outside of basic tennis, and I couldn't get anybody to play this game with me. Who's going to want to play this game with me? Nobody. And I don't think anybody should be playing it either, because it's not worth trying. And so here we have Mario Tennis releasing for the Game Boy Color in 2001. Despite sharing the same name as the N64 game, this is a very different game from that game. And looking back, this is a strangely ambitious tennis game that a lot of people have cited as one of the best tennis games of all time. I personally don't love it, but I can see how it is ambitious. Like I said, it's very different from the N64 game. Really, there's almost no relation at all. This game is actually a single-player RPG. Yeah, a tennis RPG. We had Mario Golf on Game Boy, which was a golf RPG, so this doesn't surprise me too much. You actually start as your own custom character, and you're a rookie at the Royal Tennis Academy, and you got to build up your skill by leveling up through training, practice matches, and then various tournaments. The aim of this game, and really the whole goal of it, is to beat the best tennis player of them all, Mario himself. But yeah, there's actually more to this game than the tennis gameplay. You actually walk around like these open areas, you interact with NPCs, and it does feel like an RPG in that sense. You level up your stats, and there's actually some reward here for practicing and just playing against your fellow tennis players. The actual tennis gameplay itself, look, it's not great. It's a Game Boy Color game. What did you expect? It doesn't feel particularly amazing, and it doesn't flow the fastest, but I think it's fine for the most part, especially for the hardware. I think it's more than fine enough. I would say that it really is serviceable. There's also a doubles mode, and you play through the whole game again basically in doubles mode, but I didn't mess around with this. The game has a decent length to it. You won't be done with it in like an hour. It does take probably 4 or 5, maybe even like 6 hours, and then if you do doubles, you're doubling your time with it. But I think that this is actually a pretty solid little tennis game, and I think that it got really swept under the rug because it shared the same name as the N64 game, and most people didn't realize how different it actually is. But yeah, it's a totally different game, and should you go out of your way to go play this game? I mean, I'm not saying that, but if you're looking for a fun little tennis game with some RPG elements on the Game Boy of all things, you got it here. And so here we have Mario Tennis Open releasing for the 3DS in 2012. I didn't really have much experience with this one before this video, and I gotta say this one's actually pretty decent. I can tell you it's a hell of a lot better than whatever Ultra Trash was trying to do. This game really is better than that game in just about every way outside of the presentation, but this is a 3DS game. I think the presentation's still pretty decent though. When it comes to the actual tennis mechanics, I think it's pretty decent here. I think that it feels nice. There's a lot of different shots you can do, and it's probably about as good as it's going to get on a 3DS. The game has 24 characters, pretty good number, and each character is pretty distinct from one another with their own qualities and advantages, disadvantages, all that fun stuff. And there's actually a bunch of different courts here as well. I think there's actually a good mix. Now, something I like is that this game actually has a lot of Mario flair. Yes, there are your standard courts where you get down to the fundamentals of tennis and all of that, yeah. But there's a bunch of fun Mario stuff here as well. There's like mini games where there's piranha plants involved, or one where you're bouncing the ball off a wall and as it's scrolling through like one of the first Super Mario Brothers levels trying to collect coins and defeat stuff. There's a bunch of different courts here that have some little Mario gimmicks here and there and throwbacks to other Mario games. I just like that it is more than the basic stuff, and they actually have some fun mini games here, and again, it gives it some flair, it gives it some personality, and I think it really does add to the game. This was also the first Mario Tennis game to have multiplayer. Unfortunately, it's not exactly popular right now. In fact, it's actually dead when it comes to the multiplayer, but don't tell anyone. All in all, though, I think that this is one of the better Mario Tennis games. I think it does have a decent amount of content to it, and I think you can still have some fun with it. I know that it used like amiibos and Street Pass and all that, and I would have loved to have tried it back in the day, but yeah, we've kind of moved on since then, unfortunately. Anyway, I still think it is a fun little game, and it's one of the better handheld Mario Tennis games. So here we have Mario Tennis on the N64, developed by Camelot and releasing in 2000 as one of the last N64 games. Now, Mario Tennis is a pretty long-running Mario sports series, and this was really the first modern incarnation of the series. This game is also the game that introduced one of the weirdest characters to the Mario series, Waluigi, as well as the reintroduction of Birdo and Princess Daisy. And you know, coming back to this game all these years later, this is still a pretty solid tennis game. Obviously, this game isn't realistic like Sega Virtua Tennis, it's much more arcade, but I also think it's a lot more fun. There's a lot of different shots you can do, like a lob, a drop shot, a smash shot, and the control scheme is relatively simple to understand. It's one of those easy to pick up and play, but kind of hard to master. I think later Mario Tennis games would really understand the whole pick up and play versus mastering aspect. But it really did get started here, and it's fun to see where the series' roots are. And I can admit, this game is still pretty fun even nowadays. There isn't a ton of content to it, it's mostly just tournaments, and then there's some multiplayer, and you can mix things up in the multiplayer. I've definitely had some fun memories in the multiplayer, but not as much as, say, other Mario N64 games. And despite playing pretty arcade, the game doesn't really have all that much of a Mario flair outside of the characters. Like, the only stage I can think of that really does anything different is the Bowser stage, complete with Mario Kart items, and I wish that the game definitely leaned more on its Mario roots and just decided to go kind of balls to the walls. You know, like the later Mario Tennis games, but that's hindsight, and I mean, they obviously didn't have that back when the game was released. When the game was released, it was probably one of the best tennis games ever made. It's one of the best looking N64 games, which is already a huge plus, and the music is just delightful. The original version of the game actually used the transfer pack with the Game Boy Color version of Mario Tennis, and you could import your characters and all of that fun stuff. The game's been re-released numerous times, and this was definitely taken out of, but still a cool fact nonetheless, and I have no problem saying that if you're looking for just a fun old tennis game, this is probably one of the best ones you can do. It's aged much better than some of the other Virtua Tennis games. Hey, you know, at least I can give it this. It's the best tennis game on the N64. Not even close. And so here we have Mario Tennis Power Tour releasing for the GBA in 2005. Now, despite being the handheld companion to the GameCube game Power Tennis, this game is nothing like that game. In fact, this game feels much more like a sequel to that Game Boy game I spoke of earlier. And so what you have here is another tennis RPG, actually. When it comes to the actual tennis gameplay, I think it does play better than the Game Boy game. I think it's actually pretty decent, especially the fact that this is a Game Boy Advance and it's playing as good as it is. There's a number of different shots you can do here, and I think that it feels relatively satisfying. The actual RPG stuff is pretty similar to the Game Boy game as well, where there's stats, you're interacting with characters. A number of characters that were OCs for, you know, that Game Boy game actually come back here as coaches, which is cool. There's a number of Mario characters. Strangely enough, Wario isn't here, but Waluigi is. That's gotta be like the only game where this happens. And you know, you want to be the best tennis player of them all. The game is around the same length as the Game Boy game, and I thought it was just as endearing as the Game Boy game was. I think the game, obviously, you know, it looks better, it plays better, and I think that the RPG elements are a little stronger here. I had a pretty decent time with this. I would not have expected this game to be anywhere near as good as it is. Like, if you had asked me even a while back, like, hey, what do you think of the Game Boy Advance game of Mario Tennis? Like, I'd be like, what? I'd be like, isn't that just an inferior port of the GameCube game? No, actually, it's pretty good. Some people even think this is better than the GameCube game, and I gotta say, it's by a landslide the best tennis game on Game Boy Advance, but I would say it's maybe the best handheld tennis game, like, period. At least traditional handheld, because there's the Switch now, but, like, it actually is pretty solid, and I don't think people who like the Mario sports games or like tennis games should be skipping this one, because I think it is actually pretty good, and I'd argue that it's underrated these days. And you know, it's got some fun little RPG stuff thrown in there too, so if you like RPGs, all the more to you. And so here we have Mario Tennis Aces releasing in 2018 for the Switch. This is the latest Mario Tennis game, and I was pretty hyped up for this one. Outside of a little time with Ultra Trash, this was my first Mario Tennis game in quite some time, and I had some high expectations with this game, but it absolutely delivered to be not only one of my favorite Mario Tennis games, but one of my favorite Mario sports games in general. I had so much fun with this game when it came out, and even coming back just a couple years later, yeah, this game is still a blast. I guess the first place to start would be the presentation. I think the game looks pretty good. It's clear that it uses some of Ultra Trash's assets, but aside from that, I think it does look pretty great. The actual tennis gameplay is arguably the best tennis gameplay that the series has ever seen. I actually really enjoy this. I think that it's not only really easy to pick up and play, but it really is hard to master, and there's a lot of strategy that can go into playing this game. There's a lot of tech actually with the characters too. They all feel really unique. They're all really different. And I think that this might be like the best tennis mechanics I've ever played in a game. Obviously, there's those sim tennis games that are probably a little bit more in depth than this, but in terms of an arcadey tennis game, I don't think really it gets better than this. Like, it just feels great, it's incredibly satisfying, and it's just above all else fun. Like, I really have had a blast with the tennis mechanics in this game. And then this game actually has some content. It's got a good amount of characters, especially after the updates. There's a fair amount of characters here. They also have characters that you like never get to play as in Mario games, and I really like that. Characters like Chain Chomp or Spike or Koopa Paratroopa or Boom Boom or Kamek or Pauline or Dry Bowser that are just either rarely in Mario games or you never have gotten to play as them until now, like Chain Chomp, which I just love. I think the game has a fair amount of courts to it. A lot of it does have Mario flair, and I actually really did enjoy it on that front. When it comes to the modes, there's actually quite a bit of content here. The game does have a full-fledged single-player mode where you get Thanos-style Infinity Stones for like tennis, which is pretty funny, and I actually thought this single player mode was pretty decent. It actually does have a number of mini games to it as well. It's not all just straight tennis versus CPUs, and so there's some variety here, and I generally did have a good time with it. It isn't the longest, it's only a couple hours long, but you know, I thought it was absolutely a highlight, and I just appreciate the Mario flair being there. There's other mini games here, which is great as well. And then there's really all the multiplayer madness. Like, this is where the most fun is the multiplayer, and I've actually had a ton of fun with the multiplayer in this game, not only locally but online as well. The online multiplayer was really solid for me. There was actually like almost no lag the entire time I played it back when it came out, and even nowadays it's still really good. It's really fun. There's plenty of tournaments you could do. There is actually people still playing the game all these years later. The multiplayer just absolutely kicks some ass, and it really brought me back to when I was a kid and playing Mario games with friends, like, because it really was just a fun time, and we would get ultra competitive about it too. There's just so many nuances to the tennis gameplay itself, the trick shots or how you can slow down time, just the amount of different ways you can hit the ball back and forth. It's actually a lot more complex than it looks, and I really did enjoy it. And I think that if you like tennis games and you haven't played this one, not only is this the most accessible out of all the tennis games, but it really is one of the best, and I think that it is a great time. But here we have Mario Power Tennis, releasing for the GameCube in 2004. Now, Mario Power Tennis is not only what I believe to be the best Mario Tennis game, but maybe the best tennis game like ever made. It's certainly my favorite tennis game ever made. And you know, maybe it's just the nostalgia talking here, but I have so many good memories with Mario Power Tennis, more so than any other Mario Tennis game. I mean, that could change with Aces, but I doubt it. I just really did love Mario Power Tennis. It really feels like they expanded on that N64 game to such a degree to make one of the best tennis games of all time. So when it comes to the gameplay, when it comes to hitting the ball back and forth, is it as complex or as in-depth as Aces? No, I don't think it is, but I still think it's really good and it is really fun. There actually is still a lot of nuance and strategy here, and it's not as basic as it looks. There's definitely a lot more here than the N64 game, I can give it that. There also is the power shots, which have always been really cool and a favorite of mine, and this was the first time that they really showed up in a Mario Tennis game. And all the characters did feel really different from each other. This game is 18 playable characters, and there's a couple characters here like Wiggler that you would not expect to be in a Mario game, especially in the GameCube days, and I think the cast of characters is pretty good, actually. So that seems all well and good, but what really made this game stand out for me more than Aces, especially if Aces has better tennis gameplay, it's the modes. It's absolutely the modes. I think Mario Power Tennis just absolutely crushes it when it comes to the modes. No, it doesn't have a single player with a story and infinity stones or all that, and the single player, for the most part, is just a bunch of tournament matches, usually of the singles or doubles variety. And you know, these are fine enough. The tournament modes were fun, and it does get pretty challenging, at least I remember it getting pretty challenging, but when it comes to the gimmick stuff, that's where I think this game really excels, is when it comes to the gimmick modes, the gimmick maps. Like, this is so much fun. They really just hone in on all the Mario stuff and have a bunch of references and throwbacks and just, again, a bunch of Mario stuff to some of my favorite Mario games of all time, like Sunshine and Luigi's Mansion, like where you gotta fight the ghost, or where you gotta fight Blooper Gooper and you gotta keep his goop and all his shit off the freaking tennis court. And then there's all the other mini games, I'd say, but they're more, you know, just gimmick tennis, like where you gotta feed the chain chomp. And I just love these. I really love these. This is where I've had the fun with the multiplayer. This is where I've had the fun in general. I will gladly take all of these modes over some less than refined tennis gameplay, because I just have had a ton of fun. I know that I'm not everybody, and I'm sure plenty of people would beg to differ and say that the tennis game needs to have perfect tennis gameplay, which this game doesn't compared to Aces, but when it comes to the fun factor, it's just not even close for me. And it makes me wish that Aces had some of these mini games or maybe some new ones of its own, because I just really love these. This is what has really stuck with me all these years later, was all the gimmick stuff that Mario Power Tennis did. Like, it just went nuts. Like, it really went nuts. At times it felt like Mario Kart or Mario Party nuts, like where they just went all in on the gimmicks. They said, you know what, yeah, you're playing tennis, but like there's like 5 other things going on with it, and I really just appreciate that. And I just don't think that we're ever going to get this again. I think that they're going to focus, you know, more on the tennis, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I loved how nuts this game went with all of its gimmicks, the items, the modes, the mini games, all of that. I think it really just killed it in that sense. And I can say that I've had a ton of fun on the GameCube, and then I tried it on the Wii, and it was a more mixed result. I don't think the Wii version is the version to play. I think the GameCube version is the best version, but you know what? It's better than nothing. I'll give it that. But just a superb time and one of the best tennis games ever made. Not even close. Alright, so that's it for this video. I hope everyone enjoyed. Let me know your favorite Mario Tennis game down below. Like, share, sub if you made it to this part of the video. Comment court, as in what they, you know, are playing tennis on. Yeah, court. We're going with that one. See y'all later. Bye-bye.